Welcome back, everybody. I am the Executioner, and today we're going to be doing a video. So, this is going to be me explaining something. So, me and Shane Killian got into a little sparring match because we had different ideas about the silencer SBR deregulation thing in the big beautiful bill. Originally, when this whole thing came out, right, the House version of the bill got rid of the registration on silencers, so, and the excise tax, but let's go and read that. So, alrighty. This is the law that Shane cited and said, where does it say that it would get rid of registration for silencers and get rid of the tax? So, he said it would just get rid of the tax. So, already, it's on screen. Section 112029, modification of the treatment of silencers. Sentence A. In general, section 5845A. Now, let's go and look at one of the links I provided. So, one of the links provided is section 5845, 26 U.S. Code, section 5845. Definition. So go look this up. This is a part of the National Firearms Act, the act that basically lays out the regulatory tax framework of how gun laws work in the United States. So A is firearms. So there are 8 items here. So there's item 1, a shotgun having a barrel or barrels less than 18 inches. 2, a weapon made from a shotgun if it's been modified and has a overall length less than 26 inches. Alrighty. 3, a rifle having a barrel less than 16 inches, so a short-barreled rifle. 4, a weapon from a rifle if such weapon as modified has an overall length less than 26 inches or barrels less than 16 inches in length. 5, any other weapon. 6, a machine gun. 7, a silencer. And 8, a destructive device. So when it says item 7, right? So section 5845A is amended by striking item 7. So if it strikes item 7, that means silencers, as defined in section 921 of Title 18, if it gets rid of item 7, that means item 7, any silencer, that means it's off the definitions list. Means that it's not under the NFA's purview anymore. It's under the Gun Control Act's purview, but that is not the National Firearms Act. National Firearms Act is that act that basically says you need a tax stamp for anything less than 16 inches previously. You need a tax stamp for a silencer. What used to be tax stamps for machine guns, but then they decided fuck that with the Hughes Amendment, and destructive devices. So the end bill did not get rid of the registration requirement, right? So that was for silencers, SBRs, etc. But we'll get onto that with the Senate's version. All right. So when Shane said to me, when originally in the first place it didn't get rid of registration, he's plain wrong. If it says in general section 5845A is amended by striking item 7, any silencer, and all that follows through, and 8, and inserting a 7. So basically it takes destructive devices, which is item 8, and turns it into item 7, because there's only 7 items now. You got rid of one. So, alrighty. And under that, it basically is talking about the AOW tax stamp in regards to $5, but underneath that in 2, underneath, okay, in B, under A, in 1, still got the tax stamp for AOWs, but you go down and see 2, 0 for each firearm in the case of a silencer. So that was a backup provision because basically the parliamentarian, there was always a chance of the parliamentarian would strike A, basically. So they wrote in the reduction from $200 to $0 as a backup plan, right? GOA explained that. FPC explained that. The people who wrote this explained it, and they did, right? So, and underneath Underneath 2 is free, $200 for any firearm transferred. That's keeping the $200 tax stamp for SBRs, SBSs. This is the House version, not the Senate version, which included the Short Act. And underneath that one, C, the making tax. You go down past A and you go to 1 and it says $0 for silencers, right? And after that is the $200 for anything else. So, alrighty, that's the entirety of the section. This is the screenshot. And he says, outright lie, here is the entirety of the section. Well, it's not a lie because go back to A. It says, in general, section 5845 is amended by striking item 7, a silencer, right? And it basically says, hey, now there's 7 regulated items instead of the 8, right? Because 7 was the silencers, but you got rid of 1 and now there's just 7. Alrighty. And that's his own screenshot. I'm gonna have it put on screen. So we're gonna go to the Senate version of the bill. So we're gonna go to elimination of tax on certain devices. Alrighty. So this is worded a bit differently, right? But it does the same thing pretty much. It's just a little more explicit. So go send the link if you want to, but the screenshot, but it's SEC 70436 if you want to go and look at the Senate version that was passed, basically, passed and then vetoed by the Senate parliamentarian. And alrighty. So it goes to elimination under the Firearms Act, right? The elimination of tax under the National Firearms Act. It goes 20, a definition of a firearm. Now, as we said before in section 5845A, those are the definitions. So it says 1, in general, section 845A is amended by striking the first sentence and inserting the following. The term firearm means a machine gun or destructive device. Let's go back to 5845A. And we can read, quote, the term firearm means, and it goes on to list a whole bunch. And basically, it removes the items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it keeps in 7, but it keeps items 6 and 8 and rewords it into, in general, section 5845 is amended by striking the first sentence and inserting the following. The term firearm means a machine gun or destructive device. Alrighty, so we're right at the threshold right now. We're right at the threshold of understanding this. So basically, it is saying that basically the items that were previously defined under the definition of a firearm, they got rid of all those items, and now there's only 2 items under the NFA. The term, the quote, the term firearm means a machine gun or destructive device, end quote. We go back to 5845A, and oh, look at that right here. The term firearm means, and you have all the listed items, and we go down to here, item 6, machine gun, and item 8, destructive device. So if they get rid of all the other numbers, but they keep 6 and 8, we now read, in general, section 5845 is amended by striking the first sentence and inserting the following. The term firearm means machine gun or destructive devices. So in the definition section, it defines what is regulated. So you get rid of that first sentence and you replace it with the quote, the term firearm means machine gun or destructive device, end quote. Now, SBRs, SBSs, AOWs, silencers, all that, they're out of the NFA. They are out of NFA jail. They are no longer taxed. What could have happened if it was passed by the Senate parliamentarian and if it was passed by the Senate, right? So then it is to modification of the treatment of shotguns, section 5845. That F, you go to that section, you go to F right here, it's on the screen. And it is basically talking about the destructive device section. Basically, the Secretary of the Treasury can come in and say your product's a destructive device because we don't feel it has a sporting use. for it. So basically, the bill would basically say, yeah, Secretary of the Treasury cannot do that anymore. Gets rid of the sentence, quote, except a shotgun or shotgun shell, which the Secretary finds is generally recognized as a suitable for sporting purposes. Gets rid of that section and inserts, except a shotgun shells in any other weapon that is designed to shoot shotgun shells. Alrighty, replaces it with that. Basically, it gets rid of the Secretary's power to say, you can't sell street sweeper shotguns or, I don't know, AA-12s or whatever, semi-auto versions because we feel they're destructive devices. Alrighty. So after that, right? So B, treatment of certain devices in reference to the National Firearms Act Section 5841 amended to read as follows. Quote, requirements for short-barreled shotguns, short-barreled shotguns, and other weapons, short-barreled rifles, and any other weapons are determined by reference in the case of registration, licensing requirement under state or local law with respect to a short-barreled rifle, short-barreled shotgun, or any other weapon as defined in 5845E, which is determined by reference to the National Firearms Act. Any person who acquires, possesses such a rifle, shotgun, or any other weapon in accordance with Chapter 44 of Title 18 United States Code shall be treated as meeting any such registration requirements and licensing requirement in respect to such rifle, shotgun, or any other weapon, end quote. So basically that section was saying, yeah, the states can't come back and say, hey, you have to have your gun federally registered. Well, there's no federal registry for those NFA items that were taken off the list. Now, machine guns and destructive devices would still be on there, but basically, it would say to the states, you cannot have law abiding gun owners in a state where such items are legal or such. They can't be held blackmail wise, right? So these were the two versions of the law, right? Now, the original House version that just had the silencers and the Senate, which had the SBRs, AOWs, etc., right? These are the two versions of the law. I clearly showed that the Senate version had the provisions that said, hey, we're delisting these items from the NFA, right? And I clearly explained how to read it. Section 5845A and F, etc., are part of the National Firearms Act. And if it says, well, we're striking item 7 from Section 5845A, that means it's off the list. And in the Senate version, it was pretty more clear and said that, oh, the definitions wise, the definition of firearm shall mean machine guns and destructive devices, end quote. So if it replaces that under definitions and it gets rid of the SBRs and SBSs and all that language, basically it throws it out of NFA jail, and the only things under the NFA pretty much would be machine guns and destructive devices, right? Now, we did not get that. Already, I'll concede to that one. But you to say that it wasn't even in there originally is absolutely asinine. Absolutely asinine. And I have no idea how you cannot read the actual screenshot that says Section 5845A, Item 7 removed, and you say, well, it doesn't do that. Well, okay, maybe it wasn't explicit. Maybe it didn't say, well, a short barreled rifle, shotgun, silencers, and all that are now herefore removed or whatever. Okay, alrighty. It can be confusing, some of the legal language. But what gets me personally, is that you would call me a liar and all this shit, basically, when when I was advocating for this law, I basically said to you, no, here's the section, here's how to read it, and you said, fuck you, you're lying. Okay, alrighty, call me a liar. Alright, but it doesn't change the fact that the Senate proposal that went to the Senate parliamentarian and they shot it down, a Democrat, I mind you, they shot it down. And then when we called in en masse and said, hey, we want the Short Act and the HPA Act in there. And then when Senator Clyde, Republican, put in the Clyde Amendment, he backed out. I mind you, this is party politics after all, right? And it did get removed. Alrighty, I'll admit, yes, it didn't go our way. However, the implications for reducing it from 200 to zero are that the NFA is a tax scheme under, I believe it was Soninsky versus United States. The Supreme Court said it's a tax scheme. That's the reason why, and that's the reason why it's constitutional. Now, if you have a $0 excise tax, well, now it becomes a regulatory scheme. It's not a tax scheme anymore. How do you collect a $0 tax? So the plan is to go to the Supreme Court, and there are a lot of conservative justices now. I'm not relying on the conservative justices by any means, but with the Bruin decision in mind, if it is not one, historically accurate in regards to the founding, and two, this relies on a lot of taxes and whatever, the federal government cannot use Soninsky to justify the excise tax if the excise tax was reduced to zero. Alrighty, that's what the backup was for, to reduce it from 200 to zero. Now, it could have passed. It could have passed through the Senate parliamentarian. Could have. Would have been a long shot in hell, but it could have. And if enough Republicans had balls, it could have been overridden. Now, it didn't. All concede. I will say your claim that it was never in there originally is false. So, Shane, have a great day. Hope this is educational for everybody, and have a good 4th of July.